and just laying down our heavy. So I have really enjoyed having a different speaker every week, and I'm so delighted to get to introduce Lauren. And Lauren and I met in Thursday morning when she moved here in the fall of 2019, and we ended up at the same table. And it has just been such a blessing, such a treat. She said in that very first week that she was looking for a place where she could be real and vulnerable with women. And that has transformed our group. It has been really a special time of encouraging each other. Lauren is, I'm just kind of drawing a blank right now. Okay. What she brings to our time is her experience as a wife, a mother, a friend, a teacher, and a women's ministry director. So I'm really excited to what she has to say, and let me just pray for her and for us. God, your word is so powerful. It's life to us as your spirit moves and speaks to us through your word. Pray that, as Michelle said, that our hearts are opened, that we are able to lay down our heavy to you, the God who moves mountains. Lord, may you just speak and shine your light through Lauren, that your message is heard, but that it's heard because she's being who you made her to be. Thank you for this really special time to just dive in. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. Is this working? Can you hear me? Awesome. Okay, good morning. Thank you, Gretchen. I put Gretchen in a hard position to come up front and introduce me. I know it's not her favorite thing to do, but I'm glad that she came up and did that. Thank you. I just want to start off, I have such mixed emotions. I'm so happy to be up here. I am nervous. It brings up a lot of old emotions and hurts and sadness and but also thrill. I love women. My heart is for women to grow in abiding with God, really in their union with God. Growth is something that is so important to me and that I just yearn for other women to experience. So I'm so happy to be here. But this morning it was interesting, I was in the car and For the Good came on by Riley Clemens, that song. And I was just thinking about, he just reminded me, I thought there wouldn't be a time I would be back up here. It's been quite a few years, and I really was in a place of just hurt and a lot of just basically at my bottom. And so I just didn't foresee this ever being something I would do again. And so he just kind of reminded me, which is what he reminded me years ago, was for the good. Like, I'm going to work all things together for your good. So whatever that looks like, and I have no idea what that looks like in my life, but I just am open with a posture of surrender. And so that's what I'm doing here this morning. When Brianna asked me, I was like, I don't know. She had sent me this great podcast about redefining yourself. And for me, it was just so clear. I have no idea what God is doing in my life. I'm just open arms and open hands and saying, okay, God, bring it. So like Gretchen said, when I did come to this group, I was at a place in my life where I wanted authenticity and vulnerability. And part of the reason I wanted that is because I had not seen it growing up in the church from a lot of women. It was something I didn't even know I wasn't being very authentic as a Christian woman. And so, authenticity, just so you can understand what I'm talking about when I say that, is the practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we really are. And it means taking off the masks. It means that you're choosing to let what you show on the outside be a demonstration of really what's on the inside. And I think as women, sometimes we, especially, I don't know why, but in the Christian church, we feel that we have to put up these masks and we need to play the part and we need to look perfect and put together, and that somehow that will shine God's love. But I found that to actually be the opposite. And it's been times in recovery times that I've been with women who are willing to be vulnerable. And again, by vulnerable, I mean that's an emotional exposure. So there's authenticity, there's also vulnerability, which means you just bring yourself. You bring your real story, your ugly, your positives, your negatives, and you let everyone see them. So anyways, that's just my heart for women, my heart for us joining together, and that's why I love our group. We've been together for a couple years, and man, it's just amazing that we just share our lives with each other. So all that to just introduce where my heart is so you can kind of see why I think God gave me the message that he chose to give me. And so you guys, we all studied 11 through 13 this week. It was packed. So there is no way I couldn't get through this. This is like, you could do a whole series on one of these chapters, let alone all three. So I am actually, I hope you're not too sad, but I'm actually not going to be going through the parables in Matthew 13. But I did want to, oh yeah, thank you. A little music for me. I did want to give you a resource. So on your table, you have the parables of the kingdom of heaven in Matthew 13. This is just for you, in case during your study this week, you're like, I have no idea what's going on in these parables. And you can choose during your discussion time with your group to mull them over, to talk about it, if that is something you want to choose to spend your time. I just don't have enough time to do that this morning. So I'm just giving you this as a resource. So that's for chapter 13, because I think it is important. The parables, I mean, Jesus completely changed the way in which he decided to start teaching in parables, so it obviously is very important. That's not what God told me to bring this morning. So I'm going to be talking about Matthew 11 with you today. So Elena did a phenomenal job last week getting us caught up to Matthew 11. And Matthew 11 opens with Matthew telling us that now that Jesus had given instructions and authority to his 12 disciples, right, it can be assumed that they left to go do what he had instructed, and that Jesus, it says, left to teach and preach in their towns or in Galilee. So they're separating. And then there's discussion about John the Baptist, and from prison, he sends his own disciples to Jesus, right, and asks for confirmation that he is the Messiah. And in true Jesus spirit, he does not answer with a simple yes or no. He tells them, go back and tell them everything you've seen and heard me do, right? The lame walk, the deaf speak, the dead come to life, good news is preached to the poor. He tells them to go back and do that. And then we saw in our study, again, the fulfillment of Malachi 3:1, with John the Baptist as being Jesus' forerunner, our messenger. And then, so I'm just getting you caught up so that I can get to the end of chapter 11. Then right after Jesus criticized, right, all the cities in which the many miracles had taken place and people did not repent, he issues a great call for those in faith, right, to turn to him. So I'm going to read starting in verse 25 through 27, Matthew 11, 25 through 27. At that time, Jesus said, I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and intelligent and have revealed them to little children. Yes, Father, for this was your gracious will. All things have been handed over to me by my Father. No one knows the Son except the Father. No one knows the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son decides to reveal him. So he calls those in faith to turn to him. He says that discipleship should be like a child, with childlike faith, right? He doesn't give it to, it's not, the mysteries aren't going to be enjoyed by those who are wise or the leaders, but by those with childlike faith. And as I was reading this, just this last couple of weeks, mulling it over, I mean, the idea of childlike faith we hear over and over again, and it really made me think of my posture and the way I come to God when I'm coming in. Is it a childlike faith? The best example I could think of, I have my daughter, Paisley. I forgot to tell you the ages of my kids. I have 3 kids, and they are, how old are they? 14, 11, and 9. My youngest, our 9-year-old, her name is Paisley, and she was adopted into our family. So right there's already that correlation, just like us, that we've been adopted by our Abba or our daddy, right? And so she is adopted. She also has special needs. So when we're talking about a childlike faith, I think she just exemplifies this in everything. She loves. If you've ever met her, she has this joy that is contagious. She fully trusts everybody, right? I mean, sometimes that can be bad. But for the most part, it's a good thing. She trusts her parents. She trusts that what we say is truth. She accepts that what we say is truth. And even when I was talking to Gretchen about Paisley, she was saying too, not only does Paisley give so much love, she actually accepts love really well. And that was just such a reminder to me is how we're to come to God, right? We sit there, we accept his love so that we can then love him well, love others well, and love ourselves. And so that just really rang true to me. So I'm thinking as we're studying just of coming to him like my daughter comes. I love Brendan Manning uses the definition of faith is the courage to accept acceptance. And isn't that what kids do? They accept that they're accepted and loved if that's what they've been told. So if we believe that we've been told that, we have faith that God's going to come through. Okay, so now, children with childlike faith, I want you to go ahead and close your eyes, and I am going to read Matthew 11, 28 through 30 to you. So go ahead and just close your eyes and let the words hit you. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke on you and learn from me, because I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and my load is not hard to carry. Okay, I'm going to read it again, this time in the Passion Translation, and I want to see if God illuminates a word for you, okay? So go ahead and just spend the time to listen and see what he has for you. Are you weary, carrying a heavy burden? Come to me. I will refresh your life, for I am your oasis. Simply join your life with mine. Learn my ways, and you'll discover that I'm gentle, humble, easy to please. You will find refreshment and rest in me, for all that I require of you will be pleasant and easy to bear. Okay, go ahead and if God pointed out a word or a phrase for you, go ahead and write that down. If you have a scratch piece of paper, you can use one of the handouts just on the back. And then I'm going to read it one last time. I promise it's the last time. But this one is in the Message translation, or it's actually the Message paraphrase, not a translation. But Eugene Peterson just does such a good job, I think, captivating the whole meaning of this passage. And this came to me in a time in my life when I really needed to hear it. So go ahead and listen to this one and see if what he illuminates for you. Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Go ahead and sit in that word or phrase that he set apart for you. And write it down. It might be the same or similar. It might be something different. Okay, ladies, are you feeling burdened, tired, worn out? The world we live in is rushed and crazy, and there is so much expected of us, right? And plus, because of social media, we can actually find out or feel like we can be involved in hundreds or thousands of people's lives, which is not the way we were meant to live life. Right? So we've got all of this, plus we're overscheduled and performing. It's craziness. So a few years ago, I had gotten to the point that I was so overwhelmed, exhausted by all the striving and performing. I was trying to be perfect, live up to my own expectations, others people's expectations. And really, I was burnt out on all the appearances and the rules of religion even, and sin and its consequences. I think we're all carrying some sort of emotional backpack, okay? I'm glad to get this off of my back now. And we fill it with so many things, some heavy, heavy burdens, right? Like childhood trauma and finances and sin, the consequences of ours and others. We have our health, others, loss. There's performance and shame and keeping up with the Joneses or the world, not just the Joneses. Kids, husbands, friends, their salvation, their health, their daily schedules, and expectations, the ones we put on ourselves or the ones that others put on us. Heavy, heavy, way too heavy, right? And what does Jesus tell us to do? He says to come to him and he'll give you rest and you'll recover your life. You'll find refreshment and rest. Can we actually feel lighter in this world, live freely, recover your life? When I read that paraphrase for the first time, that was the word that stuck out for me because I was in recovery myself. I was in a recovery program working the steps. I was in therapy with a counselor, still am. I will for the rest of my life, in case anyone wants to know. And it was an open invitation for me to recover. And again, not recover the life I had before, where there was this false self, but my true self, who God called me to be. This was actually possible. And maybe someone needs to hear that today. I know I needed to. You can recover your life with Christ. Maybe for some of you, the words that stood out were rest, refreshment, and oasis. Maybe you thought about a nice vacation or a spa day, right? You desperately want to live freely and lightly in the unforced rhythms of grace, right? His power in your life. So how do we get it? What does Jesus say? Yeah, easier said than done, huh? What does Jesus say? He invites you to join your life with his. Learn his ways. Take his yoke on you. So maybe you're familiar with a yoke, right? But Jesus was not a farmer. So while we think of a yoke as a piece of equipment, right, that tethers two animals together so that they can share the burden or the load, Jesus was a teacher and he was a rabbi. And every rabbi had a yoke. It was a set of teachings on how to live life. So how to deal with conflict resolution, marriage, family, prayer, finances, right? Every rabbi had a yoke. What made Jesus unique was not that he had a yoke, but that he had an easy yoke. So what does he say about this yoke? What do we do to yoke ourselves with Jesus? Do we do this makes me think of the WWJD, like what would Jesus do, when those were cool, those bracelets and stuff. That's not exactly it. You're called to take on his lifestyle, make that your lifestyle. I'm called to do what Jesus would do as an almost 40-year-old married woman with 3 kids living in Shell Beach, right? You're called to do what Jesus called you to do for who you are in your life. So I adopt his lifestyle. And what did it look like? What did Jesus look like? He was never hurried. He walked everywhere. I have a hard time. I do like to walk fast. Slow that down a little bit. He was in union with his Father, right? He meditated. He fasted. He practiced the Sabbath. He spent time with people, and he was present when he was with people, right? If we can take up that yoke, he promises you will find refreshment and rest in me. For all that I require will be pleasant and easy to bear. Pleasant. That's so nice. He doesn't promise an easy life, but he does promise an easy yoke. With Jesus, there's still a yoke. There's still a weight to life. We're not getting rid of that, right? But it's an easy yoke, and we can bear it. And even when we do try to pick this back up and carry it, we can cry out to him, I can't carry this burden, Lord, and lay it down to him. As 1 Peter says, right, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. Okay, so we got to yoke ourselves to Jesus, right? He can take one of the shoulders of this backpack and help us carry it. Now, there are some things we can release entirely to him. They were things we were never meant to carry. Some things we'll always have, and they will still have to carry him. But with God, it's not as heavy, right? Because we're yoked to Jesus. So we're all on a journey of sanctification and growing with Jesus. And on that journey, we all need some tools, or at least I do, so that we can adopt this rhythm of Jesus and remain in him and realize our union and have a healthy soul. So we're going to talk about practices, and that's what they are this morning. Not rules. I can be legalistic, so I'm just going to, in case anyone else is like me, these are not rules. They're not goals in themselves. I used to do all these things kind of like, the check marks, the good girl check marks. But it's really a practice, which means a spiritual practice just disposes us for something to take place. It opens us. It's not about performance or earning, but it is about effort, right? It does take work to grow. If you don't put in some practices in your life, you'll wake up after 20 or 30 years of going to Bible study, going to church, doing small group, and you'll just be older, not more like Jesus. So we need to have some practices to put in place. And it kind of reminds me of training for a half marathon. I can't even do that anymore, but in the old days. And I had to get up, I had to run, I had a plan, and I practiced every single day. I would not expect to sit on the couch watching Netflix and then in 3 months get up and run and expect to have a personal record, right? That would be kind of silly, or at least I'd be hobbling along. So I want to run the good race with Jesus. So I need these practices, and there are a ton of them. And maybe you have seen this, you have a handout, and I know it looks long. And this is not an exhaustive list, so I am not the expert in spiritual practices. These are just some you'll see on your table, so just as a reminder. Maybe you already do some of these, but maybe you need to revamp or you need to freshen up your rhythm, right? So remember, it's all about being engaged in the presence of the divine. So whatever ones work, that's the ones you want to try or you want to use. So we could do a whole series on these, and David even alluded on Sunday that we're going to be working through some spiritual practices for Lent, for the season of Lent. So I'm just going to go and just highlight a couple. Again, just from personal experience, that's kind of as I was talking with God, that's kind of what he brought to me. You'll see that, if you do want any resources on these, I have a lot if you aren't sure exactly what these mean. Also, if you took Crash Course here at New Life, we got a binder, and there's a lot of different spiritual practices in there. And you'll notice there are numbers next to a lot of these. Those denote your Enneagram number, if you know anything about the Enneagram. If you don't worry. It's just like an ancient personality typing system that I've done a lot of work into. I think it's a great tool for spiritual growth. It basically just helps you figure out why you do what you do and what you can do to get to your true self, who God made you to be. So I think it's a great tool for spiritual formation, and there's a little even information about that in our Crash Course binder too. So you'll see those are what those numbers next to those denote, and if it has a little arrow up, we call those upstream practices, which means it's a little harder for your number. So if you know your number, awesome, you can use this as a guide. If you don't, just pick one of them or try a couple of them. So I'll use me as an example. I am an Enneagram 1. Ding, 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 right, yeah. Either the perfectionist or reformer, depending on how you want to be called. And yeah, sometimes one sounds nicer to people than others. And my root sin is anger, but my goal is going towards serenity. So yes, I say the serenity prayer a lot. My motivation is to perfect myself, others, and the world, which is impossible and exhausting. Yes, not supposed to carry that. So my desire is to be good. So I'm always trying to counteract that by going through spiritual practices to get me into what God really is saying about me and what I need to be doing. So the first one for me that I practice is journaling. That's that first one up there. A couple of years, or many years ago, I journaled off and on, but for the last few years, I journal consistently every day. Well, I try every day. Obviously, I'm not perfect, but I try to journal. And you'll see it says move to gratitude, because for me, for ones, they can be very critical. I'm giving you a lot of information about who I am, so don't use this against me. Just kidding, I'm just being real. Okay, so they need to move to gratitude because they tend to be very critical of themselves and others. And so during my journaling time, I spend time with God. I usually read Psalm, I'm reading another scripture. I begin out by just telling my feelings, being vulnerable with God. I found that I didn't realize how my lack of emotional intelligence until I really started working through some of this stuff. And so I'm really honest with God. I just tell him exactly how I'm feeling. I even have a list of feeling words. I write them out. And then I make sure I always get to gratitude at the end. So that a practice is very important to me. And again, it's just about me sitting with him. Another is nature or creation. I love to be outside. It just reminds me of the Creator, just the awe, and I'm just in amazement at what he's created. Another one is meditating. And I know sometimes people hear the word meditating. It is obviously a biblical word, but people get confused about the Eastern practice of meditating. But I really like J.I. Packer's definition of meditating. He says, meditation is the activity of calling to mind and thinking over and dwelling on and applying oneself to the various things that one knows about the works and ways and purposes and promises of God. It's an activity of holy thought, in the presence of God, under the eye of God, by the help of God, as a means to commune with God. So that one is another one that is even just meditating on Scripture throughout the day, right? Or in your quiet time. Another one for me is margin. A few years ago, I cut out a ton of activities. Yeah, I have 3 kids, and we were busy, and I stopped it and said, no, we're not doing all the sports. We're not doing all the things because I needed room for God to move in my life. Another one that I put on here is Christian yoga or holy yoga. I put moving meditation because Tammy calls it a moving meditation, and I like that idea. That really, so holy yoga, Tammy Sonnabend teaches it. We're over at Spyglass. Highly recommend it. There's a couple of us in here that do it. And it really is a way for you to release a lot of that anxiety in your body and just focus on the intention of being with God. For me, it was super hard because I was not good. I had never taken a yoga class in my entire life and tried to move my really tight body, but I cried a lot, but it was awesome. That was what God wanted me to be. And another one, disconnecting. I went off social media a few years ago. That was huge for me because I didn't have to worry about comparing myself or knowing what's happening or fear of missing out. And then the last one is one I really want to focus on today because this was just one that radically transformed my union with God, my time that I spent with him and realizing this union I had with him. And that is silence and stillness in contemplative prayer. Okay, so first remember, we already have union with God, right? As Colossians 3:3 says, your life is hidden with Christ. So there's no separating us. And as John 15 says, right, we are the branches, he is the vine. Okay, the branches are not separate from the vine, but one with it. The problem is that our world gets noisy, Satan distracts us, and then we forget. We feel this loss of union, right? But that is just an illusion. Union with God then is not something that we need to attain, it's just something we need to realize. Psalm 62 repeatedly says, for God alone my soul in silence waits. And this is the contemplative practice. So with contemplative prayer, you're just learning to sit with God, not doing anything. So you're typically working on your breath or a prayer word, just so that you can deepen your awareness of his active, loving presence in your life. So you can rest with God. I'm going to read Psalm 46 because this is the one I think of. This is up in my house, and it's a good reminder for me. It says, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, and the mountains quake with their surging. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her. She will not fall. God will help her at the break of day. Nations are in uproar. Kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice. The earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Come and see what the Lord has done, the desolations he has brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow, and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. He says, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Because I envision our world is crazy like that, right? Mountains are quaking. Nations are in uproar. We see that everywhere. And he says to stop. Stop. Be still and know he is God. And in Hebrew, the be still is Rapha. right? And Rapha, if you know, in Hebrew, means actually, sometimes we think of still as just a quietness, but Rapha actually means to hang limp or surrender. It's this idea, and one of my versions actually says cease striving, and I really like that. It's not just about the stillness, it's about you not doing anything. And then the other one is yada, so it's Rapha yada, be still and know. So yada is the kind of know that you know that you know that you know. It's not like, oh, I know this person. I know, that they're 5'9" and, blonde hair, whatever it is. It is that you know their heart. And that's what it is. We are to be still and just know God, know that his promises are true, know what he says is truth. Cease striving, stop doing things on your own. So that's what I love about contemplative prayer, and you will see there's a handout. Sorry, it's on the back of your spiritual practices handout. Just says contemplative prayer, and maybe you have already been introduced to this, and that's awesome. If not, I just kind of want to give you a little bit more information. So centering prayer, a form of contemplative prayer, is about trusting in God's active, loving presence beyond words. So we're just sitting in silence with God, developing the ability to spend time with God in solitude, letting go of the tendency to use words. And you do use a prayer word sometimes, but that's just to get you back into the attitude of surrender. So we're slowing down and we're just letting go of our own efforts to reach God. And it can be very difficult because our minds go a million miles a moment. So you'll see I even put on there when I get to instructions, like I keep a little pad of paper next to me just in case if those thoughts, you want to try to, back to my prayer word, but sometimes things just come in your head. It's like, oh, I got to write that down so that I do not forget it and it doesn't sit in my head. The idea is this cumulative effect of spending daily time sitting with God in his presence with silence will actually transform into other areas of your life where you can be present and still in the movement of your day. And so I'm just going to demonstrate contemplative prayer. Well, you have the instructions right there. But this is something I'll usually do at the end of my quiet time. I do it also multiple times throughout the day. And I set a timer for 20 minutes. If 20 minutes seems like, zoinks, that's a lot of time, you can start with 10 and add up. But you just basically, I sometimes pick a word that God has shown me, like in my personal meditation time. But if not, I use the word surrender. And you're just sitting comfortably in a seat. You'll see the instructions on there too, but I'll be your personal demonstrator. And I usually do an attitude, a posture of surrender by keeping my hands open and just closing my eyes, and I just surrender this time to God. And again, I'm not trying to do anything. I'm not trying to say anything. I'm just sitting with him, and as my thoughts start to do, I just go back and say surrender inside my head, not outside. I just sit with him. And so, I just wanted to give you that as another, maybe a spiritual practice you hadn't thought, and it's just because God just really transformed my life with it, so I would like to give you the option of doing it. Another variation of that is also the breath of life, where you're just breathing in, breathing out, and you're realizing that you don't have to do anything, and you do not control your breath at all, that God does, and He is the breath of life. Another one is, you do that with the Jesus prayer. You might have heard that one before. It says, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, and you just repeat that. I like that one too, because if I'm doing laundry or something, that is something I just repeat, and again, it brings me back into the presence of union with God, which I already have, but it's a good reminder. There's also the 1-minute pause, which is an app. I don't know if any of you have seen that. And that one, yes, it gives you a little notification twice a day. If you want that, it just reminds you to stop and give everyone and everything to God, which we should be talking to him, right? Prayer is just communing with God. We're to do that all day, but there's something powerful too about stopping at certain parts during the day. Up at the Hermitage, They do this thing, they ring the bells when you're supposed to go to, sorry if you don't know what the Hermitage is, it's a place where the monks are and stuff. It's really awesome. Anyways, but they ring these bells to notify you to go and pray and to be singing the Psalms. And I just think that's such a great thing for all of us to just stop during parts of our day. And contemplative prayer can feel super foreign at first because we do live in this fast-paced, crazy world, right? And you'll probably realize that all the activities you usually do are language-based cognitive behaviors like reading your Bible, praying out loud. Everything is you talking. So it is a little hard, so give yourself a lot of grace and just try it. And remember, then you have more joy to tap into if you can spend this time with him. I like this quote by Basil Pennington about silence and stillness. He says, "Silence is the very presence of God, always there, but activity hides it. We need to leave activity long enough to discover the presence. Then we can return to activity with it. Stillness is present throughout the run at every point, but if one only runs, she never knows stillness. God is present in all beings, but we will never be aware of him if we never stop and leave behind all beings to be with him." So Jesus practiced this, right? The Gospels recount multiple times where he left to be in stillness, silence, and solitude with his Father. He did it before his death, in the wilderness, on the mountain. He often sent crowds away so that he could be with his Father, even missing out on ministry opportunities. So I figure if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for us, right? Our schedules should be aligning with our values. So if it is a value of yours to live life with Jesus and grow in maturity toward love, joy, and peace, then our daily schedules should look like that. The beautiful part is that if we do spend time communing with him, being in union with him, we get to overflow onto other people. I kind of think of it like all these practices are like hoses that go into a fountain, right, into the pump. And the pump just pumps us up into this union with God, right? And then we can, out of the top, just trickle into all the other little basins. And the other basins are like people in your life, right? And how many people do you know, or basins or people, that need to see the living water? They need living water. Dallas Willard says 2 things I think are crucial to remember. Hurry is the great enemy of the spiritual life in our day. You must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. Because again, we can't love God, ourselves, or others well if we're in a hurry. At least I can't. Ever try to go to church and you're running late and I'm like, get in the car, everybody there. I'm impatient, I'm angry. It's like not good. The other thing he says is you must arrange all your days so you are experiencing deep contentment, joy, and confidence in your everyday life with God. You have to do the arranging. It's not going to happen for you, right? So they say the newest research says it takes 66 days to form a habit. Zoinks. So that means it takes a lot of time. So for me, practices like I shared with you, journaling, holy yoga, slowing down, margin, all of these have transformed my walk, my intimacy with God. A few years ago, I was honestly exhausted. I was overwhelmed. I was anxious, and I didn't even know I was anxious. I just had an underlying always anxious, which I find, I guess, a lot of people have. And I had just hit rock bottom. I was done. I couldn't do it anymore, and I was sitting at the bottom of the pit, and God, he really did call to me and said, "Lauren, are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come away with me. Get away with me, and you'll take a real rest. Work with me, watch how I do it, learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly." And so I did. I'm definitely not perfect at it, but I feel this light. I can't even describe it because I didn't even know how heavy I was until I let go of all of it and gave it to God. And so I just want to remind you, don't keep putting those rocks back in your backpack. If you've already given them to God, release them, right? And when you do, because we all do it, right? Oh, no, I need to take that back. Just go back to him and release it to him again. Get back into the practices so you even realize that you're carrying them, and then you can spend that time releasing them to him. So I want you to look back on those words or phrases that you wrote earlier, if you did, if God pointed anything out to you. Just because I hope that will be a motivation for you this week to spend some time really figuring out what you can do to realize your union with God. And yes, I'm a former elementary school teacher, so I'm going to give you homework. I'd love for you this week, go ahead and really spend time with God and ask him, which of these practices either do I need to change up? Maybe I do some ones and they just feel kind of stale. Maybe you know your Enneagram number, you want to pick a couple new ones. Circle a couple. Try one this week, every day this week. And then come back to your group and let them know. What were the wins? What were the hard things about that? Share with them, and maybe that will really help them stay motivated to be in time with God too this week. So I just want to thank you so much for letting me share before we go, because I think it's important. This is something new too, to transition with God. You know, we go from one thing to the next, That's why I love that we do that quiet time with God before someone speaks. It is important for us to just be able to take a moment and transition. I was going to say this isn't going to work now, because that's the way it works. Oh, here it goes. So I would love for you to just sit, close your eyes. You can sit in that surrender posture if you want. And we're just going to do a 1-minute pause before we go and move into snack time.
Jesus, I give everyone and everything to you. I give everyone and everything to you, God. I give myself to you, Jesus, for union with you. I am created for union with you, God. I give everything in me for union with you, Lord. I need more of you, God. Fill me with more of you. That's good. That's enough for now.
That is good. And that's enough for now. I didn't say her name, Lauren Jangard. Thank you. Thank you. And now we'll move into not silence, but some wonderful sharing together. We're going to take a short break and come back to our discussion, and this concludes the live stream.